Welcome to the Go Procast, where we invite business doers who are changing lives by sharing their stories, their strategies and tactics, and who bravely talk about their failures that actually led to their biggest successes. Now it's time to Go Pro with Jeremy Torres. Mighty Pete Lonton from Fire in the Belly Show is a best-selling author, TEDx speaker, podcast host, mentor, entrepreneur, property investor, husband, and father of 3 beautiful girls. Pete has the unique ability to connect with people and intuitively ask questions to reveal a person's passion and discover how to live their mightiest life. A true power of Fire in the Belly is the Q&A, the questions and actions. Please welcome to the Go Procast, Mighty Pete Lonton. What is going on? I forgot the applause. Yeah, the crowd goes crazy.
Awesome.
I usually have that baked in.
Introduction.
Well, yeah, no problem, man. That's what I enjoy doing. So welcome to the show from across the pond.
All the way from little old Ireland. So yeah, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's one place. It's on my list, Ireland. It's where some of my favorite hooch comes from, that's for sure.
We do put out an inordinate amount of drink and fun times. So yeah, I can understand why people want to come here to see what it's all about.
Yeah, so we start off the program here basically the same things. The only thing I ask every single guest is tell me something good.
Tell me something good is that actually your masterpiece is already within you, and all you have to do is unveil it. It's not, you don't need to go look for it elsewhere. It's already within. So there you go. That's something good, right?
That is good news. It's a reality of the realization that this stuff is in us, that we're made with all this greatness, and it's usually the voice in between our ears that talks us out of it, right?
It's that Michelangelo quote that, he said he takes a block of marble and his job is to unveil the angel that already exists within the marble, right? So he's not creating it, he's just unveiling it. So it's like Acres of Diamonds, that wonderful book, and saying it's all within you. So yeah, fantastic. This is all you versus you. This is all this whole game is about.
Yeah, I forgot, maybe Michael Jordan or somebody said, his toughest competitor in his whole life has been him. And I know that's the truth for me. When I figured out how to get out of my way, things really started to cook for me. Yeah,
totally. It's the inner you versus the outer you. The outer you is the ego. It's the voice. It's where everything sits. The inner you is the real version of you. That's your passion, your desire, your fire in your belly. It's all those things. So it's outer you versus inner you, and the rest is it's purpose, it's game. That's what it's all about. You get those two aligned, and you're on the winning streak.
So let us know how this started for you. What was your past as far as your vocation, your interest? What did you start off in life kind of getting into and work-wise, and how did it progress or transform into helping people as much as you do in the way that you help them? Show us a picture of that.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough. I went through and I'm a building engineer by trade. That's what I trained up to be, and that sort of progressed. And I did well in the corporate career, and I spent a large chunk of my corporate life in London, and did successful. I did amazing things and went through. However, what happened was it's 2017. I was 37 and a half years of age. And at that point, I had moved back to Ireland and we had a young family. And I found myself, we lost a business around that time. And I came to probably what was the darkest hour of my life, in that whilst I had all the trappings, I had the house, I had the family, I had all these amazing things, losing a business basically sent me into a spiral, in that I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was. I'd achieved so many things, but yet I felt like I achieved nothing. And it's really hard, right? Because sometimes that we are so many great things, and yet we think we should be, we should be so grateful. And that's the problem. Sometimes we're okay or we're good. Well, the problem is good is not good enough sometimes. And I got to that stage, that dark point in my life, and said, listen, I need to do a change. I need to find out something different for me. And, when we got to that darkest point, and I do say from, your darkest point comes your brightest light. It's, you don't always see it at first, but it is that point when you see that. And
yeah,
when you can realize, I fondly call it my midlife opportunity. You know, people see it as a
Hold
crisis.
on. I got to set a fire on that one. Midlife opportunity is the
Yeah.
first time I heard it. That's amazing. I love it. It's mine
Yeah.
now. I'm going to give you credit 3 times.
But that's it, right? You
That's
know, so
awesome.
everything is an opportunity or possibility. You know, it's like it just depends. I mean, do you seek pain or do you seek pleasure? Do you seek you know, to go towards or away from?
Hmm.
You know, so we can look at it as a crisis, and in some ways it is. But actually, at that moment when you go through that crisis, you start to let go of all the things you've held on to. And amazingly, when we start to let go, that's our freest moment. That's the
Yes.
moment, the darkness, we actually get to see the light for who we truly are. So that's where I went through. I went through that sort of dark hole, if you like, and a, you know, some dark places in my life. And but
Hmm.
from that, I came away with the clarity and saying, you know, if I want to, you know, achieve more, have more, do more, well, then I need to change my formula. I can't just do it the same way I've done it, because I had 37.5 years to prove that formula.
Yeah.
And I proved that it was okay, it was good, but actually it wasn't good enough.
Right.
So I needed to actually look and you know, learn from those around me, learn for those that have achieved more, done more, etc. And it's not
That's
about
the
being
trick,
more.
isn't it? I
Yeah,
just had a
totally.
conversation today with my son, who is a landscape kid, and third year into the business, we're making tons of money through the business, but not a lot coming out of it. And
Yeah.
so I was like, Garrett, third year, most important year in a business's life is that year you got to turn positive. And
Yeah.
so I need a plan. It's February. I need a plan. Same, if it's not going to change unless you change it. So before you blink your eyes, it's July, and I only have 5 months to make money. So I have them, I have them on a pitch count right now. Get me that plan, because that's the whole thing.
Yeah. And it's not. I mean, that's deceptive, because I couldn't work out, because I couldn't work any more hours in the day. You know, I was
Mm-hmm.
working my backside off. I was doing all these things, and yet there was people far more successful than me that were working less hours. You know, were doing less work as such, and they were achieving more. So you like going, at that point, I've got to realize that it's not necessarily about the work per se, but it's the way you do it. It's about
Right.
getting
Yes.
strategic. You
Not
know,
even about
getting
the product or the service, because it's
yeah.
like, oh, they're successful, but they're selling X, or they're providing this, but it's more the business behind it, or the process, the system.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so that's what I came to in saying, listen, I can't, for my mental health, for my family and everything else, I couldn't do more. So I literally had to get to the point, you know, and they talk about, I need to sharpen the saw, sharpen the axe, and saying, I need to know that everything I do has a much greater impact, either in the work that I'm doing or the
Yeah.
people I'm reaching or what's going on. So at that point, you then say, you know, it's the old
Hmm.
adage, I need to work smarter, not harder. And
Yeah.
that's the lesson I went on. And just by the very fact of saying, what I know is that I don't know, that in itself was one of the most freeing things you can ever do, I think, you know,
Yeah.
is admitting, because for me, you know, really the voice of the ego is knowing, you know, the voice of the conscious mind is thinking. And those two, they're premeditated, right? If someone knows something or thinks something, they're coming with you with a premeditated decision.
Mm.
Whereas if you step down into the subconscious mind and the soul, well, for me, the subconscious mind is the language is feeling, and for the soul, it's sensing. So if you did nothing more than say to me, you know, I feel this, I sense this, well, that in itself is game changing, because suddenly you've opened up to how you truly feel. That you've stepped away from the ego, from the feeling and from the knowing and the thinking, and it's game changing at that point, because what if you just did what you really wanted to do and were, you know, served to do? You know,
Yes.
what if you just got to be those things? Well, then that would save so much time and energy and hassle, right? You know,
Yeah.
just stop doing the things that don't serve you, as Jordan Peterson would say. You know,
It's great.
beautiful.
And Chris Voss says it's kind of like the difference when that flips with the switch flips between getting someone to say, "I know that," or "You're right," versus "That's right."
Mhm.
That one word, and kind of goes back to what you're saying. If you change it from "I think" or "I know" to "I feel,"
Mhm.
if you can operate on that in a way that is, and you mean it, you're not just saying "I feel it" to create it. It has to be, when you get used to living and communicating this way of going, it's automatic. You go, oh, I think when you're thinking, and I know when you're in that really ego part. But when you start going, yeah, I feel, and now you're really operating from almost like singing from your diaphragm, and you're working from the feel, man, you probably will start absorbing this content or information or knowledge that's going to change things for you.
Absolutely. And that is a game changer. When we change to having to, sort of going our away from goals, our pain-based goals, and we change it to our, pleasure-based goals, our toward goals, saying it's not, I don't have to. The difference is I get to.
Yeah. This is called the Get To Studio.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the name of my studio.
You get to do it. I love to do it. I have an opportunity to do it. I have possibility to do it.
But that's true. But it has to be true for the bad things too,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's when,
looking at everything that way.
Well, totally. And that is game changing in itself. When we can reclaim the dark side of us as much as we can claim the light side of us, well, that is, I mean, you release, a huge amount of energy at that point. Because when you think of any negative emotion, say fear, anxiety, or anything you want to take, well, we have the energy required for the actual emotion itself. Then we have the energy required to deny that emotion. So saying, no, I'm not feeling fear. Then we have the energy required to cover up that emotion and pretend that actually everything's wonderful and peachy. So then you go, well, what if we just let go of those things, or we became aware of those things and accepted that was the case at that time? So, for example, saying, I am anxious at this time, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And at that point, ironically, the energy dismisses, because it says it's just its awareness in this period of time. I have a choice to change that if I want, but I do admit that when I reconcile this particular moment in time and saying, this is the feeling that I have. Okay, that's an interesting lesson. What can I learn? What can I do? As opposed to going, no, I'm going to just keep chanting here saying, I am wonderful, I am wonderful, I am wonderful. That voice, no, stop with that voice back there. It says I'm anxious and I'm concerned. That's making it worse, in my opinion.
Well, I had a coach who's had a great abstract thought, and so I was just talking about it last night with my wife, or 2 nights ago, which she says, basically time is abstract. Time is not real. Time is not a real thing. It's a made up, way to mark things. So she asked us one time. I was in a group learning setting, and she said, who in this group has ever had something bad happen to them? And everybody raised their hand, and she says, okay, who in this group didn't get over it? And nobody raised their hand. Eventually, everybody got over every bad thing that ever happened to them. So now it's about shortening that time. Really, if you start going, I know I'm going to get this thing, no matter what it is. And I've had the worst things that could ever happen to human beings happen to me, short of one thing. And if I know I got over it, whether it was 20 years, 10 years, or 10 minutes, why would I want it to take 20 years if it could take 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 1 minute? Literally, if you get to be a mind master where you can just go fast forward it in your head, play it out. And she did this thing where I just doing it to my wife, but she was like, play it in your mind, fast forward. She was going like playing a videotape, old fashioned, going through it. And she goes, okay, you just went through it. Now move on. And really, if you go 10 minutes or 10 years or 20 years, that's on you. So it's on you that you can shorten it. Doesn't mean you don't deal with it, acknowledge it, work around it, learn from it, change things, but don't live in that energy. And you said it, letting that energy go changes everything. And it's going to open up the next opportunity that comes and allow it in, because people lose opportunities for a long periods of time, harboring the last 2, 3, or 10 things that had happened to them.
I think, the one caveat I would say there is, and I totally agree, the caveat is that we think we've got over things, but actually so often consciously we maybe have, or we have forgiven, but we haven't necessarily forgotten. It's a bit like trimming the weeds, right? It's the bit of going, I took the top off and it's sorted, right? It's all done. I've given that enough quality time. I've given that enough emotion. I've given, but what happens is that actually you haven't taken it out by the root. You've dealt with the symptom, but you haven't dealt with the cause. Now, what happens there is ultimately that the cause will then manifest in another shape or form, or it'll come back the same as it was. And this is the difference for me between inspiration, motivation, and transformation. Yes, I can inspire anyone, I can motivate anyone, I can do all these things, but I'm just trimming the weed. I'm not taking out the root. I'm not taking out the main primary cause.
Yes.
To transform someone, you've literally got to reach in, not in a painful way, but you reach in and you find the cause and you rip that out. Well, that then takes down the stack of cards. That takes down the whole thing and your whole belief system.
Yeah.
So when people, it's always interesting when you say to someone, if you had nothing stopping you in your life, if everything just suddenly went your way, what would you achieve? And this massive smile appears in the face. I could do anything, right? I could jump buildings. I could be amazing things. Okay, so then you say, well, what happened if everything bad happened in your life? What would you achieve then, or what would go on? It's like, well, it would just be a worse version of where I am now. So it's like, so in your head, you're aware of both things that can happen, the best thing and the worst
Okay.
thing, you know? So, but you've just told me in this exercise that you know something is holding you back because you can achieve a hell of a lot more. So thank you for admitting that. So the question is then, what is it you need to let go of to spring forward? Because people say, oh, if I worked harder, it's like, well, how about you just stop doing the things that was holding you back?
It's like that elastic thing you put on your back and hook it to the wall to
Yeah.
exercise with.
Yeah.
You're never going to have no bands, but you can maybe put on lighter bands,
Yeah.
to make you go a lot further.
I mean, I sort of joke and say it's a bit like buying a nice Range Rover or Tesla or whatever nice car that you want, and you drive around with the foot fully on the throttle and the foot fully on the brake. And it's like, it's bloody town, right? It's frustrating. It's, part of you wants to take over the world, part of you wants to go and lie down, part of you wants to really just be this amazing thing, but it's exhausting being you because you're trying to be two sets of things. You're trying to be two sets of values.
Yes.
But what if you only worked to one set of values, that everything you did was in coherence, was just who you are? You accepted that I am dark and I am light. I am positive, and I'm negative. I just am, full stop.
Right.
Would that not be so much more freeing? You could just be. I don't have to, be a different person with Jeremy, and I can be a different person with, when I go to work, and a different person in front of a client. I don't have to use all the energies and just be all these different versions. I just get to be me.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we have ways to find that out now. If you're living two lives, one at work, let's say, and one at home, or one at work, it's not because of the work, it's the position or the people or the leadership that is making you act in a different way that's not your natural style. And we use the DISC assessment tool, but there's many assessment tools out there that will show you clearly natural, adaptive. And if it's much different, you're not happy, literally not happy, because you're at work. You got to be something you're not. And what you said, that freeing is when you put people in the right place, doing the right things around the right people, and now they can have literally being themselves at home or at work. And now you're going through life in the 2/3 of your awake life, because the other third you're sleeping, happy. I mean, imagine a third of your life is miserable, the third of your life is happy, or at least content because you're at home, and the third of your life you're sleeping. Just that alone, how huge of an increase of quality of life is just being yourself, whether you're happy or not, but at least to be able to be yourself. It must be, much, much different. That's the whole purpose of this company, going into these corporations and making people happy, because people are business. Business is people. And happy people make happy customers, basically.
Well, exactly, right? Well, that's the thing. That's where I came to at 37 and a half. And I didn't realize at the time, but I got so exhausted being everything that I wasn't. There was the me that would turn up to work. There was me that would turn up for my kids. It was the me that I thought turned up. And then there was the actual me. And at that point of just being exhausted from, financially exhausted, emotionally exhausted, spiritually emotional, and just all these things where I'm going, isn't it amazing at that point you just go, well, I just am, full stop.
Yeah.
And you just drop all pretense, you drop everything else. Well, what happens when you do that, and as we've just talked about, is then you are suddenly free to just be. You're not trying to be anything else. You just are. And that's what I mean by saying in your darkest hour comes your brightest moment. In that sort of revelation of saying, this hasn't happened to me. This has happened for me.
Oh,
What
yeah.
an amazing thing. Now, potentially it's painful that you've had to go through that, but wow, look at the things you've learned.
Yes.
You know,
and
and
everything painful usually pays off in some sort of positive way in the future if you allow it and accept it and live through that experience. It's just like learning something is uncomfortable. You don't grow
totally.
unless you go through that discomfort.
Yeah, and the only other way I've found of, because people will say to me, and consciously it's like, how are you feeling? And listen, words are perfectly imperfect and they're as good as we get. I mean, trying to describe a feeling, as they're saying, I'm only interested in the feeling because that's subconscious, that's soul work. And the only way I find, because people can't often necessarily describe what's going on or why it is. And that's when I will look to sort of what I would call deep genius work. I'll look to muscle testing. I'll look to, regenerative testing, and I'll actually go through that, and where it's almost like a form of hypnosis, because they maybe don't consciously know, but what they do know is subconsciously. And that's when, to me, that's a game changer. When you can start snapping those bands and you can let them go, that's a forward motion there, right there.
So how do you, as you use the word intuitive, I love that word. It's something to identify with. Unfortunately, it's not lotto numbers, but that's okay. How do you describe the gift of being intuitive? And is this something that you could work at to get better at, or is it something that it's just a gift and you appreciate it?
It's to me, it's a bit like fire in the belly. I genuinely believe if you have a beat in your heart and a breath in your lungs, I believe you have fire in your belly. You have, and it's exactly the same with intuition. How is it that you take Columbus, you take Einstein, you take Socrates? They didn't have Facebook. They didn't have
Google Maps,
all the text or Google Maps or anything, right? So at that point, you're saying, well, if they didn't have that, what did they have? Because these are the great adventurers of the world. They've come up with some phenomenal theories that we still rely on to this day. So at that point, you've got to say, well, listen, how is it that they knew more? And I actually believe that so often what's happening is that we're ignoring that little voice inside our heads, and yet we're listening to all the voices outside.
yes.
And that's why I'm saying it's the outer you versus the inner you. When the outer you gets to hold on to the microphone, and that's where it's comparing, contrasting, what's going on. Next door neighbor's done this. John down the road did that. My ex-colleague did that, right? That's all comparison. That's how it identifies itself with what's going on elsewhere. Whereas the inner you said, what's possible here? If I was to just look at all the things that will hold me back and let go, then what would be possible? And that intuition is listening to that voice. Now, the thing is, it's just the world is so noisy and so busy right now that we just don't get to do it. Now, I think it's no coincidence that people say when my best ideas come when I'm in the shower or halfway up the mountain or jumping into water. Well, quite often is because the monkey mind, the chimp, as I call it, the conscious mind, the outer you, is suddenly busy doing stuff that the inner you gets the chance to come to the forefront and have a word and say, listen, I know you're showering right now, but wouldn't this be an interesting idea,
Yeah. So two things. I like that, the monkey mind. We call it the lizard brain. So bringing the voice and hearing it, making it real, I find, is the minute I write it down. So writing something makes it really something that becomes real, and it starts releasing stuff into the ether, into the universe. It starts allowing things to go, okay, this happens. It really is the start of a domino effect. When otherwise, if you're just thinking it, and it's true, water, one of the best times that I have it, and I don't sleep. I'm really famous for not sleeping. I probably should be dead by now for as little as I sleep in my life. But it's not jumping right out of bed. It's that just a few minutes and thinking about the problem that I had right before I went to sleep. They say that the mind files everything, and then like the most pressing problem you had, if you just give it a minute, will come to you in a solution before you get out of bed. Just a few minutes. And I've tried that a few times. I have not mastered it at all, but I have had some really big aha moments in the last 6 months by trying to do that. So that's another, besides the water, and I'm a water person, South Florida. I really don't feel comfortable when I'm too far away from the ocean. And I spend a lot of time in central USA, and it's just a different vibe. So that's another thing that water that you say probably has something to do with, survival too, because it's you sink or swim, and you're in that water and you're either complacent or you're at home or you're, water is very dangerous, especially if you're in a pool or something, and it allows something other signal to kick in.
Yeah. And we are like 70% water or something as humans. And I know from my show, talking to people, saying what do they do for leisure and pleasure? And it's down to there's generally going to be water in there, either looking at it, on it, in it, thinking about it, and there's just something about it. We're drawn back to that essence of who we are. And interesting you say about that sort of nighttime sleeping, and conveniently or otherwise, I've now discovered that I can visualize incredibly well at 4 a.m. I don't know why. And I used to think it was very inconvenient. It's like, I'm trying to sleep and all this. But it's perspective, right? It's like, well, maybe I'm supposed to be awake. Maybe there's a lesson here. Actually, the reason I'm awake is because I'm trying to get a download. It's not that I can't sleep. It's actually that now is the time to go. Now is the time to listen.
And for you, it's 4. And for some people, it might be 8 in the morning. Some people might be 10. They work nights. But definitely when you realize that time.
Yeah.
And because I'm a 3 a.m., 4 a.m. guy, for sure.
Yeah. And that's sitting there and the first time it happened, because I've young twin girls and we're all sort of in the bed and, they're sort of lying on top and I'm sort of pinned down more or less at 4 a.m. and I'm awake and I'm like, God, what do I do now? And I can't put my phone on because it'll wake them and I'll do this and do this.
Right.
And then I'm just sitting there, and after a while, and then you get different feelings, fears, anxieties, all the lack-based stuff is coming in, and all the symptoms, I would call it, so that's coming in. And then after a while, I was thinking, what? I'm accepting that, and I'm just being present with fear, anxiety, whatever's going on. I'm like, well, what's sitting behind that? What's triggered that?
Yes.
And when you ask that question, saying, well, okay, what's behind there? What else can I see? And then at that point, it's saying I'm then sort of virtually connected by a silver thread to this event and saying, oh, okay, that's interesting. So that event's caused this. Was saying, well, what did I get from that event? And we go back and back and back.
Yes.
And suddenly, out of the blue, I suddenly had this almost epiphany of saying, I now get what this was all about. This stack of cards, this sort of trapped emotion that I've had was actually a way back here.
Yes.
What was the cause? But the symptom manifested in this way, and this way, and this way. And it's like, well, as we've talked about here already, what if I actually went in each time and saying, let's just assume that everything that's happening is symptomatic, and like a headache, if you have a headache, what do? You take a pill or do whatever you do, take a glass of water. But that doesn't answer the questions, what's the cause?
Yeah.
Same with procrastination or anxiety. You can do something about it, but what triggered it is the better question, right?
Yeah.
And if you know that, then you can do something about it. So
this is exactly, especially the procrastination is such a big thing. It's usually always about not wanting to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, but we choose it, right? People are saying, I don't choose procrastination, or I do this. Like, yeah, I'm sorry, but you have chosen procrastination.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Or
perfectionism is another form of procrastination too.
Yeah,
it's not wanting to let something go so you don't have to move on.
Yeah, well, exactly. So the choice of doing nothing is greater than the choice of doing something. So, like it or not, you have chosen to procrastinate. And people go, well, that's a weird thing to do, and it's like, yeah, well, welcome to the world of the mind.
That's it.
So
what do we, where do people find you? I know we have mightypete.com. Is that the preferred way? And
that's the easiest way. So obviously we have the podcast, so Fire in the Belly podcast. We have the best-selling book is out there now. So Be Heard to Be Rich. Listen to it.
Tell me about just a minute on that. And what is that about and where can we get it?
So that was the lessons. I mean, I set off on this podcasting journey to talk to amazing people. And very quickly I found I was having these phenomenal and beautiful, deep conversations with people. And so before we even got into the interviews, it was just sharing with people what I found was a useful way of actually listening to your inner genius. And it is the fact of giving space, it's giving time, it's the different methods, how you can do that. So it's been my sort of some of my lessons and learnings so far, that actually how I get to have these beautiful conversations with people, and we've done 450 odd interviews. We've released 270 episodes. We're literally coming up to our 2nd anniversary. So it's been fairly full on, but that's what happens when you get your fire in your belly, is saying, I set my own standard. I do what I want to do, and that's it. And that's what it's all about.
Well, we appreciate having you on the GoProcast. I know we had a storm interrupt us last time, but this time we got it on. We appreciate you. I'll be, having you on my next show called The Risk Factor coming up shortly. So,
Jeremy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and appreciate all you're doing. So thank you.
We got it, baby. We got that fire in the belly. All right. Thank you guys for joining us today, being part of this really cool journey for me, meeting fabulous people like Mighty Pete. We want to keep this going, so share it, like it. I hate all saying all that crap, but we have to say it. Share, like, subscribe, blah, 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 blah. How about just go pro?